For those of you who are new here, my name is Jen, I'm 33 years old, and 2 years ago I moved alone from England to Canada to pursue my dream of becoming a truck driver. Whether you're a seasoned professional truck driver with 1,000,000 miles under your belt,
I was toting my pack along the dusty Winnemucca Road,
or a complete novice without a license,
along came a semi with a high-end canvas-covered load.
but you dream of driving the North American open roads,
You're going to Winnemucca Mac with me you can ride,
and starting a new life abroad,
so I climbed into the cabin, I settled down inside.
this video is for you.
He asked me if I'd seen a road with so much dust or sand, and I said, listen, I've traveled every road in this here land. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I've peeped the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. Been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Manitoba, Lapaloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amor, Lotoca, Pillow, Ampadilla, Alabama. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I've reached the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. I've been to Boston, Charleston, Dayton, Louisiana, Washington, Houston, Kingston, Connery, Monterey, Faraday, San Vital, Scusa, Glen Rock, Black Rock, Little Rock, Oscusa, Tennessee to Tennessee, Chicopee, Spirit Lake, Grand Lake, Devil's Lake, Cradle Lake, Peace Lake. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I've reached the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. Been to Louisville, Nashville, Knoxville, Old Shermansville, Jacksonville.
Back in 2024, I was working 2 jobs. I worked as a trade plate driver from Monday to Friday, and on the weekends I delivered pizzas for Domino's. But I wanted more adventure, more opportunities, and honestly, I wanted to see what I was capable of and what would happen if I took a chance on myself. There was just one problem. I'd never even driven a truck before. I had no guidance, no roadmap, and no idea whether any of this was even possible. But despite all of that, I packed my bags, booked a one-way flight, said goodbye to everyone I loved, and landed in a country I'd never even been to before. I had no job lined up. I had nothing but a suitcase and an Airbnb. I was trying very hard not to burn through all my savings, but fast forward today and to nearly 3 years later, I've built a new life here, I've made lifelong friends, I've traveled thousands of miles across North America, I've visited 30 US states, 21 of which were from behind the steering wheel of a truck, and I've experienced things I honestly never could have imagined. I've watched the sunrise over the Smoky Mountains, I've been to the world's largest truck stop in Iowa, I've partied the night away in Nashville, I've watched the sunset over the Mississippi River, and I've even raced semi-trucks in Michigan. I've driven through every weather imaginable, from thunderstorms, tornado warnings, sunshine, torrential rainfall, and even survived 2 Canadian winters. Through farmland, major cities, tiny towns, and mountain passes that genuinely took my breath away. And that's exactly why I wanted to make this video, because maybe you're already a seasoned HGV driver who wants to make a move and has maybe been thinking about it for a while. Maybe you're thinking about getting into trucking for the first time like I did and you fancy doing it abroad. Or maybe you're just curious because you want to hear about my journey. Whatever brought you here, I'm going to walk you through step by step on how I moved from England to Canada. From how I got into trucking, to the visas and licenses that you're gonna need, how much it cost, and whether I'd actually recommend doing it in the first place. But before we get started, a quick disclaimer. I'm not an immigration consultant or an advisor. Everything I'm sharing today comes from my own personal experience, my research at the time, and I just want you guys to bear in mind that immigration rules are constantly changing. So please, please, please do your own due diligence and research. It's really important that you figure out your specific requirements and which visa pathway is the best for you. But I'm going to talk about my experience on the IEC. Right then, let's talk about how this girl from Manchester ended up driving big rigs across North America. First things first, the visa. Depending on things like age and citizenship, there are several different options on how you can come to Canada. For me personally, the route I chose was the International Experience Canada visa, or the IEC. This gave me the most freedom because it is an open work permit, meaning you can do any job with any company. You don't need a job offer beforehand, and you can move around freely in between different jobs. British citizens get 2 participations. The first visa is valid for up to 24 months. The second visa is up to 12 months, allowing you to stay for a total of 3 years in Canada. One really important thing that people overlook when getting their visa is that you also need medical insurance for the entire duration of your visa. If you don't have the exact amount to cover the duration you're going to be in Canada, you will limit your visa and they will cut it short. So if you plan to stay for 2 years but you only buy 6 months of insurance, your visa will only be valid for that 6 months. This is super important and catches a lot of people out, so please make sure you're doing your research with this beforehand. The IEC visas are capped at 35 years old. If you're over 35, there are still other options available to you, but it gets a little bit more complicated. The first thing I'd recommend is putting the kettle on, getting a cup of tea, sitting down in front of your computer and assessing which option is the best one for you. You need to take into consideration things like how old you are, which citizenship do you hold, do you have any qualifications, what's your level of education, how much money do you have saved, and most importantly, what's your end goal? Do you want to come to Canada for a temporary work experience and just go travelling, or do you want to stay permanently? More on that in a moment. Once your visa is granted, you have up to a year to land in Canada and activate the visa. My biggest piece of advice is to think immediately upon landing on how you're going to use your time in Canada wisely. A lot of people come over on the IEC to do farm work or ski seasons. This is fine, and that is kind of what the visa's meant for. But if your goal is to stay in Canada permanently, you need to start thinking about your strategy from day one. Canadian immigration works on a points-based system. Scores are affected by factors such as age, level of education, language proficiency, work experience both inside and outside of Canada, and a bunch of other things. One of the most valuable things that you can build for yourself is Canadian work experience in a skilled trade. Jobs are classified under the tier system, with most skilled trades falling between tiers 0, 1, 2, and 3. Trucking is classified as a tier 3 skilled occupation. The more skilled work experience that you can accumulate, the stronger your application then becomes. If permanent residency is your long-term goal, don't just think about how to get to Canada, think about what you're going to do once you get here. The very first thing I thought about when I landed was that I needed to generate some kind of income. Trucking school was going to be expensive and I didn't want to completely use up all of my savings. Obviously, I still had to pay for accommodation, food, cost of living, everything like that while I was there. So it was really important to me to get a job, any job, just to bring in a little bit of money. So I went to Staples, printed out some resumes, and by the 3rd day of being in Canada, I landed myself a job at Tim Hortons. Now, this was by no means a skilled job, and I knew this wasn't really going to contribute to my application for permanent residency. However, it brought in some money while I was going through trucking school, and it allowed me to make some friends and start really getting to know the community and being part of Canada. I knew it'd help me further down the line as well when applying for a trucking job because I had some kind of Canadian experience. I think a lot of newcomers overlook this because they just get hyper focused on the job they want to do and completely discredit anything else. But it is important to think about this because you don't want to use up all the money that you bring with you. It could be months until you land your first trucking job. So the next thing you have to think about is where you're going to live. I planned this well in advance of moving. The place I decided to live was based around my decision to attend a certain trucking school. I settled on Ontario for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a trucking hub. There's a lot of companies there and they do a lot of cross-border work, which is what I wanted to do because they border places like Buffalo, Michigan, Sault Ste. Marie, all these different places. So I knew there'd be lots of opportunity. Once I decided on Ontario, it was important to find a reputable trucking school within that province. And after doing my research, I settled on the Commercial Heavy Equipment Training School in Mississauga. One thing I can't stress enough is choosing a quality trucking school. It can be tempting just to go for the cheapest option, but this can be a really costly mistake. Many trucking companies know which trucking schools have good reputations and which ones don't, and you don't want to blacklist yourself by going to a less than desirable company just to save a few dollars in the short term. It really could make it harder to find a job afterwards, so really give this some thought. Remember, you're not just paying for a trucking license, you're investing in skills that are going to land you a good job and keep you safe on the road. So once I'd sorted out my course and I'd communicated with the school about my attendance, I then went to look for my Airbnb. I wanted to look for something within about a 10 or 15 minute radius on public transport. I knew I wouldn't be able to get a vehicle straight away, so it was important to be able to get around and have places easily accessible on the bus or the train, which made the transition a lot easier. So work backwards, find your trucking school, then sort out your accommodation. Before you can start your training, you also need to sort out your license. So the good news is, if you're moving from the UK to Ontario specifically, again, this is just my experience, you can exchange your UK driver's license for an Ontario G license, which is their full driver's license, without having to start from scratch. You literally just go to a Service Ontario and surrender your British license. They take it away and they give you a Canadian Ontario G license. The bad news is, however, this doesn't apply to trucks. So whether you're an experienced Class 1 driver or a complete rookie with no experience, you still need to get your AZ trucking license. You are also allowed to drive into the US on that license instead of having an American CDL, so long as you're working for a Canadian-based company. I personally chose to get my UK truck driving license just purely to have something to put on my resume. Most people think I was insane for that. But I know that trucking's one of those industries where you have to have experience, otherwise people don't want to know. So I thought at least having an international license on my resume would help me somehow. And it also gave me a really good idea of what I was getting myself in for. If you guys want me to do a video on the differences between trucking in the UK and getting your license in the UK versus Canada, then please let me know, drop a comment, and I will do that for you in another video. But it does mean you need to carry out the full training from the written tests, theory, medicals, to the practicals and the driving test. Another point I want to make about doing your truck driver training is to go in for your manual license. A lot of people get overwhelmed, rightfully so, by the double clutching and the 18-speed gear shifters, and they choose just to go in for automatic with the view that they'll go back again and do their manual endorsement at a later date. I would strongly advise against this, because think about it. You pass your test, the first thing you want to do is get a job. But how are you going to get a job if you then have to retrain and do another test? Plus, for that same reason, I personally hate any kind of driving test, and if I can just get it over and done with in one go, I will do, because it's unnecessary stress that you're putting on yourself. So stick it out. There'll be days that you think you can't do it, but you will have an aha moment where it just clicks and you start shifting as if it's second nature. So please stick to manual. You'll be much more hireable. Even if companies are starting to transition over to automatic trucks, you still will be far more hireable and desirable to companies if you've gone that extra mile and got your manual license. Then comes the fun part, looking for a job. I know drivers with 10 years experience in the trucking industry in the UK that it's taken them a good 6 weeks to get a job here. Lucky for me, even as a rookie, it took me about 2 weeks to land my first trucking job. And I heavily credit this to the strategy that I used when job hunting. I did a lot of research on Canadian resume layouts because they're quite specific here on how they want things to look. And I only listed relevant experience. So the fact that I was a trade plate driver, I'd driven for Amazon before, I had my UK trucking license, my experience at my reputable trucking school, and I made a big point of any driving related job experience. I submitted resumes and applications through websites like Indeed. I also just searched for Ontario-based long-haul trucking companies. But not only would I submit the actual application and send in my resume, and I'd actually call to follow up with the companies a day or so after sending my resume. So I'd submit the email and then follow up and say, hey guys, my name's Jen, I've just moved from England, I'm looking for a truck driving job, and here's what I have to offer. That way, You're making yourself stand out as an actual human being instead of just being a resume on a pile of other resumes. This was really effective because I ended up with a total of 3 job offers after my first 2 weeks. I got offered a job doing fuel transportation, but this ended up being just a DZ position and it would take 2 years to build up to doing AZ, so the big trucks. I also got a job offer doing oversized heavy haul flatbed work, but with this being my first ever truck driving job, I didn't want to dive in too far at the deep end. I stuck to my guns and I knew I wanted to find an over-the-road, cross-border, long-haul trucking job, which is exactly what I ended up getting. I was hired by a company based in Newmarket called Newmarket Equipment. I was then able to get myself a little car to do the commute, and I drove with them for a year and a half. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How much does this all cost? And the honest answer is a lot more than I expected. Moving to another country is not cheap, especially when you haven't got another job lined up and you're trying to move into a new career. It is possible to line jobs up in the trucking industry, but I have no idea how you do it, so you're going to have to do your own research on that one. Plus, I like a little bit of adventure, so doing it my way is a little bit more spicy. So the first major expense was obviously the visa itself, the IEC. Between the application fees, the mandatory health insurance, the flight, and the proof of funds that you need to enter Canada, which I believe is around 2,500 Canadian dollars, you're looking at several $1,000s before you even set foot in the country. Then there's the accommodation. I booked about 3 months in advance for my Airbnb because I knew that it'd take me a while to get through trucking school. And I think I paid about 650 British pounds a month. That works out to roughly double in Canadian, so about 1,200 Canadian dollars a month, which is pretty expensive. But the cost of living in Ontario is notoriously high. So think about that when planning where you're going to go. My single biggest expense by far was trucking school. My AZ training alone cost me around $7,500. That's without considering anything like license fees, medical examinations, transportation, and everyday living expenses. By the time I'd paid for my visa and done everything necessary to make this trip happen, I'd invested a significant amount of money making this dream a reality. So please save more than you think you're going to need. Okay, so that pretty much covers the fundamentals. I know there's a lot more to it, and I'm going to do a few more videos on different topics, like the differences between driving in England versus North America, but there's so much to go into. So please comment down below if there's anything I've missed or anything you'd like me to go into in more detail in another video. But in the meantime, if you're keen to get your journey started or you've got some more questions that have been left unanswered, you can check out my ebook that I've created from scratch. It's available on Etsy and it goes into all the nitty-gritty bits in far more detail. You can click the link in the description box below, or you can type in bit.ly/England to Canada. Like I said, before I made the move, I had nobody to turn to or ask for advice. There was no resources online. I didn't even know it was possible. So I've made this ebook to try and consolidate all the information and the things I learned through trial and error, quite honestly, to help you to make your transition a lot smoother than mine. So was it worth it? If I could go back to 2024 and speak to that girl sitting in Manchester Airport with a one-way ticket wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, I'd tell her to do it again tomorrow. There's been highs and lows. I've felt lonelier than I've ever felt in my life. I've felt more fulfilled than I ever have in my life. I've made some unforgettable connections and had just some of the wildest experiences I could have only dreamed of. I always say that you only regret the things you don't do. So if you try it and it doesn't work out or it's not for you, you can always just come home again. But I'd strongly advise that if this is something you've been curious about, to let that curiosity grow and see where it can take you. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. And like I said, I will help out with any questions if you comment them down below to the best of my ability. Don't forget to subscribe. I've recorded my whole journey from start to finish, so check out some of my older videos, share them with your friends. If you want to support the channel in a different way, you can head over to my Patreon. We have a great little community over there of people interested in trucking who just like to follow my story, and I give more of an insight in what I do on my days off and how I spend my free time in Canada. So don't forget to check that out as well, and thank you as always to my wonderful patrons for supporting the channel. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Let me know if you've got any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!